Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central Television. I am Judith at TV. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. And we begin in the United States of America, where President-elect Donald Trump has been busy selecting members of his cabinet ahead of his official return to the Oval Office. Trump's nominations so far have drawn criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. Now, critics say many of the nominees either lack the experience for the job or are too controversial for the role. And though the U.S. Senate, where the nominees will be screened, is now controlled by the Republicans, some of Trump's cabinet picks are expected to face a pushback. News Center's international correspondent Afia Hagen has more.
Donald Trump is creating a show of force that will help define his new term as he tries to leverage Matt Gaetz into the Attorney General's office. The president-elect has been calling senators to press them to confirm his pick early next year, even as counter-pressure grows from GOP senators who want to see a House Ethics Committee report into Gaetz's past conduct, including over an alleged sexual liaison with a minor that he has denied. The controversy took another twist when a lawyer for two women who appeared before the committee said they testified that they were paid for sexual favors by the Florida Republican. The attorney said that one of the women told the committee that she witnessed Gaetz having sex with her then underage friend in 2017. Gaetz denies any wrongdoing, and the Justice Department did not press charges after its own investigation. The Ethics Committee report has quickly become the first big crisis of the incoming second Trump administration. A small handful of Republican senators would be needed to defect in order to block Gaetz's nomination when the party controls the Senate majority next year. The escalating drama is posing a critical question. How far will Trump go in trying to force Republican senators to back his choice, even though some have deep reservations about Gaetz's character and qualifications for the job? But Trump is also making this about far more than Gaetz, creating a test of power that reflects his own self-confidence, the balance of power in the new Congress, and his belief that the GOP Senate should be at his service and not be a moderating force. The president-elect's unorthodox pick of the Florida Republican and the muscle that he's already put into his candidacy means that Trump may soon approach the point where it will cost him more political capital to fold on Gaetz than to keep trying to keep him installed, whatever it takes. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagen.
Now to discuss this, I'm joined by author and humanitarian Professor Mukesh Kapila. Prof, many thanks for joining us. Let's just get started. Controversial cabinet appointments. How do these appointments affect the stability and functioning of the federal government during a presidential transition?
I think your correspondent put it very well, that this is about a test of will and strength between President-elect Trump and Congress and Senate. I think she put it well when she said that President Trump will have an attitude which talks about his troops in the two houses of parliament should be supporting him, not moderating him. Now, that's what remains to be seen. But I think I'm fairly confident that when one of the nominees, like the one mentioned, is beyond the pale, then I think he might even lose the confirmation battle for one or two of them. And if I was Trump, it wouldn't be a battle worth fighting. But we know that Trump, for him, it is extremely important to assert his power more than anything else. So it's a struggle for power. And obviously there's a lot of politics involved in the process as well, regardless of the facts.
So let's look at the long-term effects of this appointments could have on the reputation and effectiveness of federal agencies. Would there be any long-term effects?
Well, the federal agencies are already under a lot of pressure. They're already titrating their future policies and actions on the presumption that many of the activities they are engaged in are no longer going to be approved or officially looked upon as good activities by the new president. So in many ways, the administration of the federal agency is already changing, anticipating the changes ahead. And if the cost cutting that is also promised comes along with the changes of operational policies in all the home departments as well as the foreign departments, then I think we're going to see very significant shifts in terms of the sorts of programs these agencies do, whether in health or in social security or in immigration or in terms of science and technology.
And what does let's talk about the criticism of these figures. For example, Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. What does this suggest about the polarization of U.S. politics? I mean, when you look at the Republicans and what they stand for, and with these very controversial figures being appointed, it begs to ask the question about criticism.
Well, we know that that the United States is a polarized country, but then what's different here? Many countries around the world who have gone through democratic elective processes indicate polarization. That is the nature of the way the electoral system in conventional democracies operates. And as it turned out, President Trump got a very significant majority in terms of the popular vote, as well as the electoral colleges and so on. So I think whether we like it or not, Mr. Trump has a majority support amongst various demographies and demographics around the country. So it's not as polarized as was predicted when the election was about to take place.
I mean, what then would now be besides just the Democrats and the Republicans reacting to this cabinet appointments, what has been the public's reaction as well to this appointment and shaping the early days of a presidential administration that's not even been signed in yet?
True. Of course, all new administrations have a period, a honeymoon. Now, in this case, it's a question of how much disquiet there is with the Biden administration for different reasons. The unforgiving thing about the public is that they're not necessarily going by the facts, they go by emotions. So we have, for example, the American economy has actually been doing quite well, but the Americans feel that they're not so well off. So therefore, the Democrats, as we know, got punished on economic grounds and on immigration grounds. So the emotions around the Biden administration are going to play into a sort of honeymoon phase for the Trump administration. And probably that honeymoon phase will last maybe 6 months, maybe a year, before we really see what's really going to be happening in terms of American society and American policies. Now, during that period of government formation of new administration, clearly the Trump side is impatient to get going. And hence the nominations it's making already, a couple of months before they actually get into power, and the battles that have already started in Congress and so on. So what that indicates is that they are going to be pushing and going very hard at it. And they will win probably 80-90% of what they want, which would be a pretty good show for the Trump side.
Well, we'll wait to see what will happen in the early days of his administration. But Professor Kapila, many thanks for coming on. We appreciate you for doing this with us.
Thank you.
We head now to South America, where the G20 summit is underway in Brazil, and climate negotiators are trying to resolve a deadlock. It comes as G20 leaders acknowledge that trillions of dollars are needed to support developing nations facing extreme weather conditions. Activists and diplomats have criticized the Intergovernmental Forum for its lack of clear direction on climate finance and a failure to address phasing out fossil fuels. Now, developed nations often fail to remit their annual climate finance pledge as disagreements over financing scope, responsibility, and term permits persist, stalling a final deal.
au millième jour de la guerre d'agression lancée par la Russie contre l'Ukraine. Et je sais que vous partagez, comme nous, la volonté d'une paix durable, respectueuse de la Charte des Nations Unies, et que vous partagez, comme nous, la même inquiétude après les déclarations belliqueuses et escalatoires de la Russie en matière de...
And on the sidelines of the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping took out time to discuss the war in Ukraine. Macron told the Chinese leader he'd like to see peace restored in Ukraine, a key topic at the G20 this year. Macron's comments underscores France's alignment with China in seeking long-term stability in the region. Now, in May, Macron hosted the Chinese leader when he made a state visit to Paris. And still on the Russia-Ukraine war, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared that 2025 will be a decisive year in determining the outcome of the war with Russia, nearly 3 years after the invasion began. Speaking to Parliament on the 1,000th day of the conflict, Zelensky unveiled a resilience plan designed to ensure Ukraine's stability during the critical periods ahead. His address came in the wake of U.S. approval of Kyiv to launch American missiles into Russian territory. Moscow has escalated aerial strikes on Ukrainian cities and reportedly deployed over 10,000 North Korean troops. Meanwhile, diplomatic discussions about a potential peace deal are gaining traction following Donald Trump's election as U.S. president. Now, Trump's statements advocating a swift agreement have raised concerns that Washington might pressure Kyiv into making territorial concessions.
У вирішальні моменти, а вони будуть у наступному року, ми маємо не допустити, щоб хтось у світі засумнівався у стійкості всієї нашої держави. І на цьому етапі війни вирішується, хто дотисне. Або ми ворога, або ворог нас, українців і європейців, і всіх в світі, хто хоче жити і жити вільно, і не підпорядковано якомусь одному диктатору.
In the same vein, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on Europe to intensify pressure on Russia in a speech marking 1,000 days since Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Zelensky's appeal came amid speculation that Ukraine may have used the U.S.-supplied ATACMS long-range missile system for the first time to strike a target deep inside Russia. Now, this followed Washington's reported approval for Ukraine to use the missiles. An ammunition warehouse in Russia's Baskaks region, about 100 kilometers from the border, was struck by missiles. Addressing members of the European Parliament, Zelensky warned that Putin would not stop unprovoked and urged allies to push Russia towards achieving a just peace.
Швидко маємо діяти мудро. Можливо, Україні доведеться когось в Москві пережити, щоб досягти всіх своїх цілей. Можливо, щоб відновити повну цілісність нашої.
You're watching Stories Beyond the Continent. Let's go on a short break. When we return, schools shut across United Kingdom as snow brings chaos. We'll bring you the details. Stay with us. Back. We head off from the continent and now to Europe as at least 74 schools have been forced to close today after the Met Office issued 3 yellow snow and ice warnings. The UK National Weather Service warned of disruptive conditions across the West Midlands, Greater Manchester, North Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, thousands of people have been affected by the return of sub-freezing temperatures, with several schools closing for the day. Some schools in Yorkshire were forced to close after heavy snowfall, while others in Oxfordshire shut due to electrical and water supply issues. Pupils in Berkshire, Herefordshire and Nottinghamshire have also faced closures. Our parents have been advised to check online to confirm whether their child's school have been impacted by the adverse weather conditions. Earlier, our international correspondent Afia Hagen joined us on the news to give us an update on the matter. Stay with. Take a look.
That this cold weather was coming since last week, and it's quite early on in the season to get temperatures this cold. Usually it's about 11, 12 degrees during the day. In London today it's 5 degrees, and the temperature is going down all day. So more than 200 schools across England and Wales have closed, 11 in Scotland as well. And we've had 3 new weather warnings have been issued just in the past hour for the east of England, for South East Scotland, North and Central Wales, and for Northern Ireland. And that's for the cold to get colder. Now, like I said, it's unusual to have temperatures this cold for this time of the year. It's the coldest early winter since 1998, with snow and ice covering much of the country. Now, I am in London, quite far south in the United Kingdom, and it was unusual. We did have some snow flurries earlier on this morning for about 2 hours. It hasn't settled because the ground was already wet. But certainly in London, to have snow at this time of year is unusual. Fortunately, at the moment, the snow has held off for me to talk to you, but more snow is forecast for later on today and into this evening.
British farmers have gathered in London to protest controversial government plans to alter inheritance tax rules for land ownership. They argue that the proposed changes threaten their businesses and jeopardize food production. The protesters called on the Keir Starmer-led administration to reconsider the policy. Last month, Parliament announced changes to inheritance tax in the budget, which limit the 100% relief previously available and introduced a new reduced tax rate of 20% where none existed before. Now, National Farmers Union President Tom Bradshaw said the protests would continue for as long as necessary to secure change. Farmers fear the financial burden imposed by the policy will force farms to be broken up and sold, with devastating effects on food production and supply. Away from that now, as French farmers have launched a fresh protest against a proposed trade agreement between the European Union and 4 South American countries. Mercosur. Now, they argue that the pact threatens their livelihoods. The affected farmers organized rallies across the country, displaying mock gallows and wooden crosses to symbolize the death of agriculture in France. Last year, farmers in France and across Europe protested against policies they claimed were cutting into their revenue. The French government is leading the resistance against the ratification of the trade agreement with the Mercosur bloc, comprising of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Now, the deal would create the world's largest free trade zone.
Que c'est de la concurrence déloyale. On va nous envoyer des millions de tonnes qui ne seront pas nourries pareil, aux hormones, avec des céréales OGM. Et nous, on ne peut pas, quoi. Donc à un moment donné, le coût, ça sera toujours trop cher et on ne sera pas compétitif.
Nous, on a des charges. En France, on nous impose une certaine qualité d'agriculture qui impacte forcément des charges supplémentaires. Et on est en concurrence avec des gens qui sont à des cours mondiaux, qui n'ont pas du tout les mêmes charges et pas les mêmes aussi. Nous, on défend aussi une agriculture propre sociétalement par rapport à d'autres pays. En plus d'avoir une meilleure qualité sanitaire de nos produits, on a aussi une qualité sociale derrière qui est quand même bien supérieure au monde, mais ça, c'est un prix. Et ça se défend, voilà. Et c'est pour ça que...
Spain's King Felipe VI and Queen Letizia have returned to the flood-hit Valencia region after their previous visit sparked outrage. Survivors of the October 29 disaster, which killed 227 people, had hurled mud and insult at them during their chaotic November 3rd visit to Paipuerto, where residents blamed leaders for mishandling the crisis. In contrast, their Tuesday visit to Chiva was met with applause and chants of "Long live the King" as they arrived at the town hall, accompanied by Valencia's region leader Carlos Manzo and Government Minister Angel Victor Torres. Security was heightened and the itinerary kept secret after the earlier unrest. Constitutional law professor Vicente Garrido said the visit reflects the royals' commitment to consoling survivors. Kyiv, still reeling from the floods, welcomed the renewed royal support. A court in Hong Kong on Tuesday sentenced all 45 defendants convicted in the city's largest trial under its sweeping national security law, with mastermind Benny Tai receiving the longest sentence of 10 years. The United States, Australia, and human rights organizations swiftly condemned the verdict, citing it as evidence of the city's declining political freedoms as Beijing imposed a security law in 2020. The group was charged with subversion after holding an informal poll in 2020 as part of a strategy to secure a pro-democracy electoral majority. Meanwhile, a Taiwanese lawmaker, Puma Shan, has urged politicians on the self-ruled island to take heed of developments in Hong Kong following the sentencing of dozens of democracy campaigners in the city. And that's all we can take beyond the continent. Now remember that you can always follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live wherever you are. We're on DSTV channel 422. You can also find us on Star Times channel 274. We're also on Apple TV, or take us everywhere you go and stream us live on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Judith at TV. Bye for now.